Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
All right, Purple Daily on Draft every Monday on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and podcast feed. Tyler Fornes, Miles Gorham, Declan Goff here to take you through another edition of Purple Daily on Draft. We take what the Vikings do in the draft and we kind of monopolize it throughout the course of the year. We are in the dog days of July now. June's always the fun month people like to make fun of for grasping at straws, and I do understand it. But now with like the holiday weekend, it's kind of like the last, next couple weeks are the last kind of things that take some time off and relax before boots hit the ground at training camp, and then we are immersed with football through basically Valentine's Day. So we're going to have a conversation here with Forno and Miles. Forno wrote about breakout candidates. We're going to dive into that. We're going to have a UDFA update, and then I'll throw a little question at these two dudes also near the end. So hit the like button, subscribe button. This is Purple Daily on Draft. Forno, at the Sporting News, where you're now writing for, you wrote 6 breakout candidates to watch at Minnesota Vikings training camp. Let's kind of go one by one here. Some names we've talked about before and some names we maybe have just kind of mentioned in passing. I do want to start here, though, with the first guy on the list that you talked about in Ty Chandler, because Aaron Jones was brought in here to kind of fix the running game. Didn't work out with Alexander Mattison. Flashes of Ty Chandler last year, but clearly the Vikings didn't feel enough to give him a starting job or at least make him RB1. So what about Ty Chandler to you will stand out at training camp, and why could he be a breakout candidate this season for the Vikings?
I think it's fair to say when you're talking about Ty Chandler, it's not about how good he is, it's about consistency, especially with the pass blocking. One of the things I loved about him coming out of North Carolina, great pass blocker. And he flashes great ability at pass blocking in the NFL, but he has these lapses that are catastrophic, and you can't have that. Like, if you miss and you let your guy by after like a second, okay, you just lost. That's fine. But you can't be catastrophic and not even getting a hand on your guy. And that happened. That kind of thing happened a little too much with Ty Chandler, which is why I don't think the Vikings were comfortable like giving him the full workload, which is completely fair. He needs to figure out that consistency, and pass blocking is one of the toughest things for a running back to come in and be able to handle at the NFL level, because athletes are just bigger, stronger, and quite frankly, built different. So you watch Chandler last year. He's much better running in gap concepts in zone because he sees a hole. He's just going to hit it, and he's got 99th percentile explosiveness and 40-yard dash. So not only can he explode through the hole, he can then outrun you too, which is a great thing to have. It's not a necessity for a running back, but if you have it, it's a trump card. And he's good out of the backfield catching the football. But I think Jones is brought in not necessarily to be an alpha, but to provide a level of consistency that Chandler just does not have yet. And I think now that we're entering year 3, he got a good amount of playing time last year. You can go back and look at the film. Hey, boom, 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 boom. These stink. This is what I want you to work on during the offseason. And my guess is that focus was mainly on figuring out the pass protection element. If he comes in and is a consistent pass protector, you can trust him now in all 3 phases of the game. And being able to trust a running back in all 3 phases means you're going to be out there more. Because if you can't be trusted to pass block, you're not going to be out there on third down. And if teams know that you're not going to be out there because you stink at pass protection, guess what? They're going to be able to key in on the running game. So there's a lot of different elements at play here. Everybody knows Chandler has the ability. Everybody in the building believes in him. Players like Dalton Risner have come out and said, no, sorry, it was Harrison Phillips, just straight up said, yeah, Ty Chandler's really good. So that's huge that the team buys into you. Now he just has to be able to show it on the field. That consistency element is now there.
Miles, how do you envision the workload going with between Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler when the season starts? Because last year and even in the KOC kind of era, we've seen where when it was Dalvin Cook, like Madison was in for a series, every third offensive series, that was Madison's series. Do you envision this kind of being the same thing? Like Aaron Jones maybe gets the first 2 blocks and then all of a sudden Ty Chandler gets the third series. How do you kind of envision the workload being balanced out between Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler?
Well, I think based off size and just like injury history, Aaron Jones is probably he's not a guy that you want to play the 90% of the snaps. Dalvin Cook used to be a guy, Adrian Peterson used to be a guy who would barely ever come off the field because they just took on that workload. And the coaches also just were like, you're our best players. We're going to keep on the field. I just don't. I think Aaron Jones is a really good player and probably a really underrated player. But he's just probably not somebody that you want to have playing, close to 100% snaps, maybe even close to 75% of snaps at this stage in his career. So I think if you can kind of have a good 60-40 mix, but they are similar like style of players. I think that's the difference. But like what Forno was saying is Aaron Jones is a proven pass protector. He's a proven route runner and receiver out of the backfield, and just a guy who's been proven to be able to carry a rushing ability on his back, a team's rushing attack on his back, excuse me. And so I think Chandler's going to get his opportunities to play. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays quite a bit, but like what you guys were saying to start this is it's all about how he handles everything else. How's he handle the blitz pickups, his ability to protect in pass pro, and then also just hitting holes and understanding what the coaches want him to do consistently. He's just got to be consistent. I think that's always a thing for young guys in general. Is if once they find that consistency, they typically will stay on the field more. And I think the one thing you do with Aaron Jones is you bring that level of floor up. But I also think Aaron Jones, I think it'll be hard for Ty Chandler to outpace Aaron Jones in anything on the field in terms of snaps, unless there's an injury. But I could see like a 60-40 scenario because both guys are very similar in how they play. So I think you can keep a lot of the same like playbook and plays within this in the system. You don't have to change it up for them because they play similarly. So I think their strengths are similar in that way too. So you shouldn't have to change things up. Whereas like it's not predictable when either guy's on the field, and I think that's important. Now from like I guess maybe that's where I'll leave it because I'm not really sure. Like I said before, I don't see Chandler beating out Aaron Jones in any case. They brought in Aaron Jones for a reason. But I think I could see a 60-40 type split very easily because Aaron Jones has also proven that he's good with a limited amount of snaps. He's not I love Dalvin Cook, Adrian Peterson, but those guys, they kind of needed a larger workload to show that efficiency. The more that they handled the ball, the better they got as the game went on. Whereas I think Aaron Jones can handle the ball 15 times a game, but still have 5 yards of carry and a few catches and just kind of like outpace, what you'd expect from a Dalvin Cook when if he was only getting 15 touches, you probably weren't doing well. Whereas Aaron Jones can do well off of a limited amount of touches.
What do we make of Dwayne McBride's future? He was someone we talked about a lot on Purple Daily on Draft last year. An incredible college career at UAB, was a practice squad dude last year. Is that where he probably sits here, Forno? Do you see Dwayne McBride making a jump and trying to has a chance to make the 53 instead of just being a practice squad dude?
He's got to show that he can provide utility on special teams in the passing game. And so far we haven't seen it and we haven't heard it. I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think the reports were that McBride just kind of looks like a guy during offseason activities. That's not a good sign. And it's frustrating because he did have a great career and he was an absolute wrecking ball in the running game, averaging over 6 yards a carry. Yeah, it was at UAB, but he thrived against high-level competition when he got an opportunity to play them. So it wasn't like he was just beating up on Arkansas States of the world. So he's got to show that. And if you're the third running back, you got to provide those elements. You can't not. And I think practice squad is probably the likely option for him because you know who does provide those options? His counterpart, Myles Gaskin. That's what he does. Yeah. He's a third down kind of utility back and good on special teams. And that's honestly what you need to have.
Another man on your list, Tristan Jackson. So we talked about who could be the third wide receivers that emerge here for the Vikings. And I don't know if we talked yet last week a lot about Tristan Jackson. I mean, he would definitely have to beat out some competition. You mentioned that in the article too, Forno. But, I mean, Miles, is Tristan Jackson still someone to watch here? Is he probably more of like maybe the last receiver on the depth chart that gets one of those last 53-man spots? I don't know if he probably makes the leap and is like wide receiver 3 when they open in week 1. But he definitely feels like a bubble guy. And if he has like an impressive training camp, he might show up a little bit and earn himself a spot in the 53.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't put the odds at 0 that he's wide receiver 3. Wide receiver 3 is a crapshoot for me. Jalen Naylor is going to be given every opportunity, but that also requires him being on the field.
Yeah.
And if you're not on the field, you can't earn the job. Brandon Powell, really good player last year, has been in the offense for a long time, but he's small. And how the Vikings have shown that they like to play offense with a lot of these condensed sets and using that third wide receiver as a blocker, that's not exactly conducive to what Brandon Powell brings you. He feels like a good rotational guy, wide receiver 4, Trent Sherfield was a wide receiver 3 for the Dolphins 2 years ago. He was fine, but he's more of a special teams utility guy. Jackson's been in this offense for, I think, 5 years because as UDFA out of Syracuse, he signed with the Rams, and Kevin O'Connell was the offensive coordinator. And then he came over to the Minnesota Vikings when Kevin O'Connell took the head coaching job. And I think Alec Lewis described him really well as a quadruple A player for you non-baseball people. Too good for triple A, not good enough to be an everyday starter. He's a good guy. He's a good hand to have. I think he's probably best as your wide receiver 4, 5, or even 6. But I think there's a non-zero chance he gets this wide receiver 3 job because he's been ingrained in the system. He's been ingrained with the organization and the playbook. And having knowledge of that playbook and extensive knowledge is a massive benefit for somebody trying to compete for one of those spots. I think it's plausible for him to earn wide receiver 3. I only put it at 5 or 10%, but it's non-zero, and I think that's important.
Similar things, Miles, on Tristan Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, he's been here. What, this is year 3 for him now. Same amount of time as Kevin O'Connell. I feel like it's either like really take that step of being a guy that can contribute consistently or not. And I just don't know if I believe he will be. I'm not saying he can't be. It can't be 0 because of who they have. I feel like he's paced ahead of guys like he's behind Powell, obviously, but then it's him and Lucky Jackson and some of those guys that they brought in, right? Like unknowns that he's like competing against, but there really aren't any guys he shouldn't have the edge against, like Thayer Thomas and those things. Like he should have an edge over all the guys, maybe not named Jalen Naylor, because Naylor's the guy that they drafted. That they still talk about highly, that they have like belief in. But I feel like that's who he's competing with. So if he can't win the job or win some sort of job now, then it's probably not going to happen. And so now, again, I'm not saying he can't do it, but I'm not putting my like eggs in his basket like it's going to be him or nobody. I just feel like there really isn't like an excitement around it. But if he can win a job, that'd be great. Like I mean, that just goes to show that he's improved over the years and he can finally solidify himself in a role. But if he doesn't, I won't be surprised either, just because we really haven't seen much of him besides offseason hype. And I feel like we get that a lot every year with there's always a couple of receivers that get the offseason hype and then they don't really do anything. Tristan Jackson could be that guy this year. So we'll see what happens. But I'd put my bet on Brandon Powell, Jalen Naylor, or outside hire. Like that'd be kind of like my like scenario right now. But if Tristan Jackson comes in and takes it, great. I'll never root against that, but I just don't have like a lot of faith in it at this point.
On the defensive side, Brian Asamoah was one of those guys that Miles just mentioned, like off-season hype. Last year, there was some off-season hype and build around on him. And then training camp happened, and he just kind of fell through the cracks. Like I don't really fell through the cracks from his own doing, but I mean, do you still think there's a good player in here, Forno, that Brian Asamoah can actually not just be a fringe linebacker, but also can still contribute? They obviously bring in Blake Cashman. Ivan Pace had a hell of a season as a rookie last year. Where does Brian Asamoah fit into the Vikings' plans?
Well, has he improved tackling? I think that's going to be the number one key with Asamoah. And one of the reasons why the Vikings 2022 draft looks as poor as it does is because they drafted for the Vic Fangio style defense. And that's a big part of this. Lewis Seen, Asamoah, Andrew Booth Jr., none of them are great tacklers. You don't have to be a great tackler in that defense because the whole idea of it is gang tackling. If I miss, guess what? There's going to be somebody right there to clean up my scraps. In Brian Flores' system, that's not how it works. It's a very aggressive, very tactical defense that you need to get your job done. The whole New England Patriots mantra, do your job. It's kind of what this defense is. If you miss the tackle, that could go for another 20 yards. That's a big, big problem long-term for like the defense, especially as you kind of go through the game. You can't be missing tackles like that. Asamoah did flash at the end of 2022, show that, hey, maybe this guy could be a starter next year. And then he just didn't mesh right away with Brian Flores. And I think a lot of it had to do with that tackling. Year 3 is always the make or break year for guys. It's really hard to fully judge a draft class until you get deep into year 3, because then you can kind of see what some of these guys are, because development happens. It's real. Just ask Geno Smith. Like, yeah, you don't want it to take 9 years, but he went on such a weird career path. That's a whole different story. But these guys need time. And it's not everybody can be Justin Jefferson and come in and be great right away as a rookie. And I think we get a little too spoiled with some of those guys. So we see, hey, CJ Stroud was like a fringe top 5, top 10 quarterback as a rookie last year and led the Texans to the divisional round of the playoffs. That's not everybody. And I think we need to be patient with some of these guys. Now, if Asamoah comes in and just is not good and he ends up maybe getting cut, then we can have a different discussion. But I'm going to keep an open mind here. And if he really did improve some of that tactical stuff, a year in the system is obviously going to be a big factor as well. Then, hey, I think you can use him because he is a really aggressive downhill player and you can get him into positions where you can blitz.
Miles, on Kyrie Jackson, the Vikings rookie cornerback they drafted this year. Obviously, we're kind of looking for someone in that room to emerge. Byron Murphy's the veteran, but kind of just dart throws with a lot of other players, with second-year players, third-year players. Kyrie Jackson being a rookie, some big length here. Is he someone that could potentially wow Brian Flores and the rest of the Vikings in training camp and maybe be the breakout corner that the Vikings have been looking for since basically Xavier Rhodes, kind of hit a cliff in his career? What do you kind of expect from Khyree Jackson at training camp this summer?
That week one of Mike Hughes in 2018, that pick 6 from the 49ers, that had my heart jumping a little bit. But yeah, I'm with you. They haven't really had like a true breakout young corner in a while. I think Mekhi Blackmon could be a guy that I think they truly like. It seems like he's a guy that they really want to see on the field. But as we've talked about like throughout the offseason, he's a smaller guy. So it doesn't mean he has to play inside. But I think within this type of defense, you do need a little bit more physicality on the outside. And Mekhi Blackmon, we saw even as a rookie, kind of there's times where he got out-jumped or, got bullied a little bit. And that's not his fault. He's smaller. But I think he's always in good position. But I think with Khyree Jackson, he gives you that outside, length, speed, press corner that, I think Brian Flores loves. And one of the reasons they brought in a Shaq Griffin is because he is a little bit more of an outside press corner. So Jackson gives you a little bit more of that, what they don't have across the board on the roster. So you hope that he could come in and maybe be your fourth corner, fifth corner right away. I'm hoping fourth. It's clear that Andrew Booth Jr. and Caleb Evans are kind of in the doghouse. I'd say especially Andrew Booth Jr. is in the doghouse. Doesn't seem like that he's coming out of that anytime soon. To me, it's really him or Caleb Evans for that fourth spot because they're similar players. They're outside press man corners. Caleb Evans should have the inside track, kind of like a Jalen Naylor in this way that we talked about at receiver. But Khyree Jackson has every opportunity to come in and take that role from him because Caleb Evans we've seen him on the field and he hasn't produced the way you'd like him to. He's been up and down, injuries and all those things. But again, consistency is a big part of what keeps guys on the football field. And if Khyree Jackson can show consistency throughout training camp and throughout the preseason, there's an opportunity for him to see the field early on as a rookie. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of wins that fourth job and is that first reserve off the bench early on in the season. And you're kind of hoping that's what happens because you want to see a guy like him step up because after this year, Byron Murphy Jr.'s he's a free agent, so is Shaq Griffin. So you don't really know the outlook of the future of that position. So you kind of hope a Blackmon and a Khyree Jackson kind of take some of those roles so that you can build off of that in the future. So it may not be right away, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing earlier than we expect.
Forno, what do you like about the potential of Khyree Jackson here? I know he had the limited college snaps and playing time, but when he did, it flashed. He's an older cornerback to an older prospect, I should say. What do you like about the potential of Khyree Jackson?
Long, physical, athletic. This is Joanne Williams in a better package. This is what Brian Flores wants. He wants guys who are big, who are going to get in your face of the line of scrimmage. You have the length to be able to get into your shoulder and chest. And then when you run zone, they have the length to be able to clog up passing lanes and be able to attack the football at the catch point. And Jackson has all of these traits. Now, I think there are some real concerns about why he didn't play at Alabama really over 2 years, less than 300 snaps combined, despite a coach being on the record saying that Jackson was the most talented guy in that room. That included guys like Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Brian Branch, some really good football players in there. All of those guys went top 50. So why wasn't Jackson getting on the field? Well, I wrote a piece back in May. Could have been politics because Jackson was a JUCO guy. All these guys are 4 and 5 star recruits with the lowest ranking being, I think, 92 on the 24/7 scale. And Jackson, just a JUCO guy. So my theory was that politics played into it because once we went to Oregon, it was like, hey, this guy's good. Why wasn't he on the field at Bama? So I think the fact that he's also 25, you can also kind of factor in some of that Jaren Hall discussion where we talked last year about Hall not really being a true 25-year-old as far as football, like physicality, because he spent 2 years on a Mormon mission. Jackson spent, I think it was 2 full years working at a grocery store. So 2 less years of hits on your body, meaning 25 is not the same 25 you're going to get next year with guys like Brand Keithy and Cam Rising coming out of the college ranks as 25, 26-year-olds, because they have that wear and tear in their bodies. So I'm really intrigued by Jackson. I think he and Mekhi Blackman really shows a signal shift for how the Vikings want to play cornerback. And I'm really intrigued to see what happens with him.
A couple other names on the list here that you brought up. Michael Jurgens being one of them. A guy who might be able to earn one of those backup interior offensive line spots. A 7th-round pick in this last year's draft. And do you profile him as a guard, Forno? Do you see a center in him at all, or is it just mostly guard?
He's played center. He only played guard in his final season at Wake Forest. If you can play center, you can play center. Now, would he possibly be better at guard? I'll be honest, I haven't dived into the film enough to be able to make a true distinction between, hey, is he going to only be a guard in the NFL? No, he's going to be a swing guy initially. But the Vikings believe he can be a starter. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said so, and it was in the draft video. That's not a mistake. Anything in the draft video, like, look, those draft videos are fun. It's cool to get an inside look. But at the end of the day, they're state-run media. They're propaganda. And him saying that carries a little bit of weight. And obviously, if Kwesi feels that way that strongly, good amount of influence probably comes from Chris Cooper, the offensive line coach. And if they both like him a lot, the Vikings have had success drafting centers late in the draft. Matt Burke, John Sullivan. And centers, you don't have to be selected high in order to be a really good football player. Jason Kelsey, I think, was a 6th-round pick too. He's probably a first ballot Hall of Famer. So you look at all those factors, maybe Jurgens can be a guy and he can prove that, hey, I can be that first guy off the bench right away, even as a 7th-round pick. Is it likely? It's offensive line. You never really know until you get out there and you're full pads and you're blocking NFL defensive linemen. If he's got it, that's a phenomenal get for the Vikings. If he doesn't, it was pick 230, and it's not the end of the world.
By the way, a shout out to our friends, the 3M Open, which is back this month in July 22nd through the 28th. At the 3M Open, golf matters, great play matters, and great golf shots matter. You can be there by going to getting your tickets at 3mopen.com. That's 3, the letter M, open.com. It was a great time the last few years there. Hole 18 is a fun one and one of the more fun ones in golf. So go check out and get your tickets now by going to 3mopen.com. Little UDFA talk here. So is Gabriel Murphy, in your mind, Miles, probably still one of the better bets of the UDFA guys to make the 53? Is this also someone that probably will still hopefully make some hay on special teams? I know a couple weeks ago we spent a big episode on special teams and what it's going to look like with the new rules. But Gabriel Murphy, is he still maybe your betting favorite as a UDFA to make the Vikings roster?
I don't know if I'd call him a betting favorite, but I think he's got a strong case for at least being practice squad at worst. I would be my guess, is based off what they paid him. And I just think his profile, I thought he was going to be closer to like a mid-round pick in the NFL. And I think that kind of goes to show, kind of like a Michael Jurgens that you guys were talking about, is how much this fluctuates between where guys could go in the draft. They could either go in round 4, round 5, anywhere between there and round 7, or even undrafted. But like some teams, like Kwesi said, he would have probably taken Jurgens in round 5, I think it was. Was that where they took the kicker, round 6?
Yeah.
It was at least a full round ahead of where they actually took him. I know that they were willing to take him in some of those other spots. So it's like, that's where teams really fluctuate with like how guys are valued. So like Gabriel Murphy, again, I'm surprised he wasn't drafted, but he's just a guy that I believed in as a draft pick. But also, I just think, as a UDFA, that gives him more room to be a potential like practice squad guy. But maybe he does crack the rotation over an Andre Carter. Jihad Ward, who knows kind of what they expect from him. He's a depth piece, but he hasn't been very good. So there's room for him to make the roster. There's just a little bit more competition overall for a spot than some of these other positions we've talked about. So he's got a little bit of a harder runway to make it, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did, just because I think there's ability there. I think the length of his arms is probably the biggest issue that we've seen, and I think that's hurt some of his engagement. And we'll see how he handles NFL offensive tackles, because I think that lack of length has kind of hurt him when he doesn't get an immediate get off and beat some of the tackles off the edge. Is kind of when guys get hands on him, it's a little bit harder for him to make some moves. So we'll see how he handles that in the pros, but I think there's enough ability there to potentially make and be like your fifth rotational pass rusher. Patrick Jones is the fourth guy now. So it kind of, they've improved like the overall depth of that position. So it'll, like I said before, it'll be a little bit harder for him, I think, to make it. But if there's an opportunity, they're not committed to Patrick Jones. They're not committed to Jihad Ward. They're not Andre Carter, maybe a little bit more, but like it's not a no, but I would be a little bit hard pressed to say it won't be a hard battle for him, because I think it'll be tough for him to make the roster early on.
Do you like Gabriel Murphy as a 53 guy still? For now, we talked special teams off mic too about being a big reason why some of these guys could be surprises. Where do you think Gabriel Murphy fits in the Vikings' long-term plans?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, Declan. It's so hard to understand what these UDFAs can be during the off-season workouts. Now, sometimes you can just be like, okay, this guy is really good. Like they talked about Dallas Turner right away. Yeah, the movement skills are freaky. And you can see some of that, but you don't really know until you put on the pads with a lot of these guys. And I think that's going to be a big thing with a guy like Murphy. He's got to show that length is not going to be a big enough issue, which, let's be honest, it could be debilitating and he could be cut and never heard from again. Yeah. That is a realistic outcome, because having 30.5-inch arms is really, really bad for a defensive lineman. Now you can overcome that somewhat, and UCLA did find a way to kind of mitigate it by kicking him inside and being able to kind of, as like an under tackle, like a John Randall idea, where he's a smaller guy, use your quickness and get underneath guards' reach before they can really get their hands on you and be able to attack that way. But I think Murphy has a chance to be the next Ivan Pace, where you just use him in a specialized role and you can get something really good out of him. Use him as a blitzer, use him in a lot of different facets. Like, he's got 93rd percentile athleticism. So he has everything for the position, but arm length. Now, maybe he can just do some arm hangs in the school gym to try and lengthen those an inch maybe. But that's about the only thing I think that'll really make a massive difference for him. Like, you're just going to have to utilize what you have. And what you have is still a good football player. And it's probably just going to be specialty roles for him, because I don't see him really ever becoming that starter unless that athleticism, he's just so good at wielding it that the arm length just gets mitigated, which I just don't see happening.
All right, last question for you guys here on Purple Daily on Draft. We briefly talked about this on a full edition last week with Mackey and Judd, and he made the rounds because he was catching passes from J.J. McCarthy. Is there any hope or any reason to bring back Adam Thielen to the Vikings? Do you have any want to bring back Adam Thielen to the Vikings? I guess, Miles, would you like to see him brought back? I know the Vikings do have limited draft capital going forward, which probably also makes this even harder. But Adam Thielen finishing his career with the Vikings, do you see that as a possibility, or even something you'd like to see?
If he gets cut, sure. I'm not trading for Adam Thielen in that contract. Ain't no way. Like, right. There's a reason the Vikings didn't pay him. If he wants to come back and take a close to Vetman type deal because he got paid by the Panthers, and it's kind of just one of those situations, sure. Like, I have zero issue with that, him coming back, him being like your third receiver. That's cool with me, because I think they added more speed to that room than what they had when Thielen was here in 22. Mm-hmm. And he could really truly be more of a compliment, but otherwise, no, I wouldn't invest in bringing him back. Otherwise, it's cool that he's playing catch with JJ McCarthy. I think it was actually near us, Declan. I think they were maybe at the Woodbury High School, I think, or the middle school, if I'm not one of them. I know that they do workouts over there, so wouldn't surprise me at all. Like, if he's had those conversations internally, like, hey, if things don't go well at the Panthers, maybe I'll come back. Like, I'm sure that they would have him back, but again, price means everything, and if it's not for like close to Vetman, even with the Vikings have some cap space, I wouldn't bring him back for anything other than very dirt cheap, just because there's just no reason to bring him back otherwise, in my opinion. But I think it'd be cool to have him back. I mean, it's always a cool fun story, like, bring guys back. But he's not washed. He had 1,000 yards last year, but he was on a really bad team. Yeah. I guess my question to him would be like, what are your expectations if you were to come back? Because we knew him leaving. They kind of told him that they wanted to find some other guys that would, JJ's obviously, he's the guy, Addison coming back, he would be the guy. TJ Hawkinson, when he's healthy, is another dude. Like guys above him on the pecking order would be quite a bit. And so it would just be a question to him is like, what kind of role are you willing to take on this team? And so if he's willing to take, a wide receiver 3 role where he's the 4th guy in the pecking order, 5th guy in the pecking order, obviously cool with it. If he's not, then he probably wouldn't be back.
And I think that's a big thing for me. I don't think he's willing to take that kind of role because I don't think he thinks he's at that point yet, which let's just be real. A lot of the numbers that he put up in Carolina, some of them were like, hey, this guy's just playing really good. Some of it was, I have nobody else to throw to. And I think it's too soon. Maybe in 1 or 2 years, you bring him back as kind of that veteran leader, but he was just here and he was not very effective in 2022. I think bringing him back could be a mistake for a couple of reasons. And it's not because I don't think Adam's a bad guy. I think he was a captain for the Vikings at one point. He strikes me as a good dude who busts his butt, but the wounds are too fresh. And I would stay away for those reasons. He got cut because he wasn't up to snuff for the contract anymore. It's probably best for both parties to remain separate. But I will say, McCarthy working out with him rules because you get a receiver that's outside the organization, one that knows your offense, which is a big plus, teaching you landmarks. And it's not like Declan, Miles, the 3 of us could go out and I could throw you guys passes all day. But when we're talking about running a 12-yard dig route where I have to have the ball at a certain spot at a certain time and get that timing down and work with it and figure out, okay, I need to use this footwork in order to make the throw. That kind of stuff is going to be huge from working with a guy like Thielen who's got a ton of experience in the league and has worked in this offense. And I think it's great. And working with different receivers outside of just the guys in the building is good too, because you're going to learn little nuances. You're going to learn how to develop chemistry with different players, which is going to help you develop chemistry with the guys in your locker room. I think it's objectively great, but bringing Thielen back, to me, it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I think Miles. I don't think they'll cut him. I'm just looking at his contract.
I was doing that same thing. Yeah.
I was like, what could that be possible?
What is it like? An $11 million dead cap hit if they cut him?
Yeah,
13?
It's barely any savings, and he has voids also built in at the back end of it. So. Yeah, it'd be pretty surprising if he were to be cut.
Well, and also that receiver room in Carolina still probably needs another veteran, and he's that kind of like that guy right now for them. So, I don't see a reason for them to cut him unless he just looks absolutely awful in camp for them.
Absolutely. All right, hit the like button and subscribe button. This is Purple Daily on Draft every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. We've got a holiday week coming up. We got some time off coming up, but we'll still map out a schedule to release some Purple Daily on Draft content over the next few weeks before training camp then starts, and we'll have plenty of camp notes and things to get into. But hit the like button, subscribe button. This is Purple Daily on Draft.